Hello, thank you everybody for joining today. I think everybody who is a creator cringes at the idea of being asked, where do you get your ideas from? But nonetheless, we have 60 minutes to talk about that with two of, I think, some of the most qualified and thoughtful cartoonists working today. So I'm going to introduce real quickly Tom Gauld, the author of Mooncop, Revenge of the Librarians, Department of Mind-Blowing Theories, and his cartoons have appeared in The Guardian, The New Yorker, and your latest book, Physics for Cats, is debuting at SPX.
That's right,
Yep.
at Drawn and Quarterly.
At Drawn and Quarterly. And Kevin Huizenga, did I say that right?
Yes.
Is the creator of Curses. I apologize. Curses, a collection of literary short stories and poems. Glenn Gange's The River at Night, where really explore the concept of insomnia and consciousness and philosophy. And both of you guys have books available at Drawn and Quarterly table. Are you doing signings later today?
Right after this.
Right after this?
Yes.
You as well?
Everybody's going to be so excited. And they're going to stampede up there. Yes.
Yes. Head straight there after this. So when we think about ideas, I wanted to ask you guys a very general question to start. And have you guys seen the documentary Get Back about the Beatles that was on Disney?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. So you know that scene, there's a moment where you see Paul McCartney sitting off by himself, kind of finding the tune for Get Back. Mm-hmm. And it's just looks like this beautiful moment of inspiration where he's just pulling it kind of out of the air, and he doesn't even have the lyrics yet. So I just wanted to ask you guys as a starting point, have you experienced similar moments when you're creating your comics? Tom, I'll let you start.
I guess there is a lovely moment when I guess almost all my ideas, all my cartoons, the graphic novels, the short ones, my illustrations all begin as me doodling in my sketchbook. And I'll sit and start drawing, and I might have a bit of an idea, or I don't have an idea, and I just draw something around me and start filling the page with my thoughts. And there is a moment when something clicks, and I think, oh, this can be something. I'm not just doodling anymore. Something started to come together, and with a bit of work, I can turn this into a cartoon. And as someone who does 2 weekly cartoons, it's really a lovely feeling when almost in that moment my work is done, and I know I can get through the rest of it with craft. But it's that spark where you think, oh, this is going to be something, which doesn't always happen, but is a lovely feeling.
We have slides of this moment, right?
I'm going to go, so we were going to go through a number of specific examples where we talk through both of your work and look at the process of going through it. So I can jump to a slide if you want, but...
I was just pointing out, Tom makes these great little... on his notepad with all these nice little icons of all the little ideas. Yeah. Anyway, we'll see it eventually. Yeah.
And how about you, Kevin?
Yeah. What's your experience?
I mean, it's different in that, like, I don't have a regular deadline. For a while, I did have a strip called Leon Beyond, Amazing Facts and Beyond with Leon Beyond, and I had to come up with an idea. It was every other week, and there was but what happened is it. At least for me, I didn't feel like ideas were a problem because at a certain point they would just start stacking up, or you would start just going about the deal with the strip was that it was fake facts, so it was like did you know, but it was all made up stuff. But just going about life, there would be something would come up I don't know, like something about hamsters or something, and I think, I could maybe do something about hamsters for the strip this week, but then it would start to stack up where I would be I would have the hamster idea for this week, and then somebody would talk about frisbees or something, and I'd be like, okay, frisbees could be the next week, and so sometimes it didn't seem like it was a problem. I wonder, for you, do you have it where you're in desperation, where you're oh no, and then it's the idea's not coming? Or is it you can always kind of depend on it, it'll show up? every week?
Well, it has shown up every week, but
Yeah.
it doesn't always feel like that.
Yeah.
And I do feel like, oh fuck, this is the week that's going to get me fired for doing a lame cartoon.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can feel like that and hand something in and think, oh well, that'll fill the gap this week, and next week I'll do something really good so they don't fire me. But then when you look back at it later, I don't know if you find this, in the act of making, you're not always the best judge of how good something is.
Sure.
So I often feel desperate about it, but
Yeah.
I think that's maybe just part of my process. And what you were saying about your whole life turning into, I'm almost like the Terminator with this red
Yeah.
dot, like beep, 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 that can go in a cartoon, that. So I just
Yeah.
always carry around a little notebook in my pocket, and I'll put anything in there. However bad the idea is, however half-formed, I just want to get it down.
But do they stack up where you're like, I have a lot in the tank and I'll be fine? No.
I think once I have a couple in the tank, then somehow the hunger goes,
Yeah.
and then I
muscles.
get lazy, or
Yeah.
I think, oh, I'll spend longer on something else. So I don't stack many up.
Yeah.
We have a number of examples that you guys have shared. I'm going to jump to the first one. Tom, this is your work. So I wanted to ask you, this strip is a quote by Soren Kierkegaard that you turned into a strip that's really fascinating in the way it moves both forward and backward through time. And I wondered if you could kind of talk through your process and kind of the seed of the idea and how you developed it.
Yeah, well, I guess that goes kind of what we're saying about seeing things in the world. I saw this quote from Kierkegaard. I think I was just looking at a book of kind of science quotes and thought, oh, there'll be something in here which will set off an idea. And I just thought that's a great quote. And you can kind of see on my sketchbook, that's my bigger sketchbook, which I carry around in my bag. And you can see I'm just trying to figure out, there's this really great quote he's got, and it talks about things going forward and backwards. And almost when I had that, I thought, okay, we're done. This is going to be an interesting cartoon. And then the next challenge is the technical challenge. How to make this playful cartoon which reads both ways, but isn't confusing. And in New Scientist magazine, where this appears, I think some of the readers, these will be the only comics they read. They're not necessarily comics fans. There's probably some 80-year-old physics professors. So I'm always aware I don't want to make anything too taxing, but I also want to be playful with the world of comics. And I suggested this one as a slide because I'm particularly proud of the kind of comics formalism, but also just fun, which is kind of what I'm aiming for.
Yeah, great. Kevin, this one is one, before I even jump into the specific questions I have, can you kind of just share, because there's a lot of text, can you share what this is?
Well, so what this is more and more lately, I just improvise on a page like this is just, more and more lately I sit down and I write the words warm up, and then I ink the words warm up, and like that's what's happening here. And then more and more I just draw. So unlike Tom, I don't really have like regular gigs. I'm just kind of fooling around all day in my studio and flailing around and trying to stay happy and sane. And but what I draw these comics panels the same size, and I usually try to draw 4 rows of text at the top. And what this is like me drawing comics for no reason, just to kind of like work the muscles and practice. And so I'm kind of improvising the text as I'm making this. And so I was thinking about like what cartoonists do when they're drawing. And so the text is about like, do they listen to a baseball game? Do they listen to music? Do they listen to new music? Do they listen to their favorite music? Do they listen to Howard Stern? Do they listen to audiobooks? And I teach, and so I'm often thinking about like communicating to students about what it's like to draw comics or how to draw comics. And so I'm sure this is me thinking about like, what do I tell the students about like how it works. And so I included this slide to show kind of like what it's like when I just am improvising for its own sake. And the characters, I made up this comics game called Fight or Run, again, as an improvisational form where I have these characters on this horizon line and they meet each other and then they decide to either fight each other or chase each other. And it's just something that I can improvise on the page for fun. It's almost like to calm myself down or like as a meditative thing or just to play, you know. So that's what's happening here.
One of the things I really like about your work, I don't know, probably always, but especially more recently, is it almost feels like you're trying to break down the barrier between your sketchbook and the finished work. Like the two things are it's much closer than mine in a way, where they're connected, but they're sort of two separate parts of the process. It feels with you, you're kind of doing both at the same time. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, it's not explicitly like, I need to join these two worlds. You know, explicitly, it's more like I'm making up all these little games for myself to improvise on the page. And, you know, drawing these big bubble letters is one thing. Improvising text in 4 rows at the top of the panel is like another little game I play. Like, I try to fit the words perfectly in the space without like ending too quickly or without like needing a hyphen. Like it's like a writing challenge where I can, you know, so that's what's happening. And there's something about improvising that I'm getting more and more into, because it's like you never know what's going to come out, but also sometimes it's just nothing. It's just a little improvisation. It's whatever, it's fine. But it's very pleasurable to like make the lines and do the drawings.
So it's almost like a little bit of a meditative stretching practice.
Yeah, it's like practicing an instrument or something. Yeah.
And the other thing I kind of think about what you just said is there's something a little bit frightening about the blank page. And when I start a fresh page of a sketchbook, the first thing I draw, I'm often a bit sort of over tight about and thinking about it too much, but then you get in your flow as the page goes on. And by the end, I'm usually doing much better things. But that first thing you draw can sometimes be kind of clammed up and difficult. So I guess this system solves some of those problems.
I think the thing that we both do is we don't just sit and scratch our chins and think, right? Like you have to draw and you have to like have a conversation with the drawing, and the drawing suggests something that you would never have thought up on your own.
Yes. Exactly.
Like even you kind of like doodle something and then you're like, oh, you know, this is actually... And that there's nothing like that feeling. That's very exciting feeling.
Yeah, and sometimes the cartoon ideas come from me where 2 pictures have ended up beside each. Like one day I'm drawing in my sketchbook page and I stop halfway through, not for any reason, but just because I have something else to do. And then the next day I start again, and those 2 things which weren't meant to come together do. Mm-hmm. And often comedy particularly is about putting unexpected things together. So the sketchbook's a great place for that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Tom, here's a New York Times cover that you did for the kids section.
Yeah.
How is this different from just doing a daily strip? And maybe you can take us through the process you went through here.
Well, the real difficulty for me with a magazine cover, I do them for the New Yorker sometimes, and I did this for the New York Times, is communicating an idea entirely without text. And I love the mixing text and image together in comics. I very rarely do anything silent. So that's the challenge, I want my illustrations to tell a story, even when they're one panel, and to suggest what's happening next or what's happened before. So I guess the real challenge is doing that without text and generally without panel frames.
I'll show the final here.
And this was for like it was a summer issue, the New York Times for Kids, and it's this great magazine which actually they've just stopped publishing, which is a monthly magazine purely written for children, and they wanted something about summer vacations, And as you saw in the previous version, the other big challenge is coming up with an idea that the editor likes. In my cartoons, I'm kind of left alone to do my own thing, but with something like this, there's a bit more persuading the editor what's going to work. And the editor, Deb Bishop, was great, and she helped push me into coming up with this idea, which in the end I think is better than what I started with. So that's a different thing. With comics, I'm just doing it on my own, whereas often with illustration, you're collaborating with someone.
So can we go back to the previous slide? What I was kind of wondering about, so you get the email from Deb Bishop. Mm-hmm. What do you do next? So you're like, I just sit down and you're like, I'm going to draw 4 different versions, or you're like, I'm going to draw 1 and send it in. This is like a little maybe boring, but I wanted to ask Tom about like the nitty gritty of like the professional practice of doing this kind of thing. It's interesting to me knowing other professional illustrators, how much work you have to do at the early stages. Like you have to draw it, and then you have to draw it again, and then you have to draw it again. And do you plan for that, where you're like, I'm gonna have to do this, I'm just gonna sit down and do 5 versions, or do you sit down and do 1 version and then there's back and forth and back and forth? I'm just wondering how that works.
It kind of depends who the client is. There's some people I work with a lot who I can just send one thing and they'll be like, great.
Yeah.
But the first thing I do is exactly the same as the comic, is I just sit and fill a sketchbook page with random thoughts, not thinking about how they fit into this slightly awkward, very tall space. And then I think what's up there, there's like 6 rough ideas. I think I sent them 3 rough ideas, and they said the thing I hate most as an illustrator, which is, none of these are quite working, but could we combine 2 of them?
Yeah.
Which is just like, but when somebody says something like that, you generally think, well, maybe I won't combine 2 of them, but they definitely don't like them, so I have to start afresh. And actually they did point out some of the things they liked. They liked the car piled with stuff. And so in a way, they put different elements of my sketches together. And the other thing is I really wanted this image, because it's a big broadsheet page.
Yeah.
I really wanted to be full of detail and stuff happening, because I know kids like that. I mean, I love doing that, and kids love it. So
Adults hate it though. Adults hate it. Adults like clean lines and grids and grays and taupe.
Then it was just making a list of all the cool stuff I wanted to put in there. And once I had the structure, then I make a pencil version, which I get them to approve. And I kind of say at that point, once this is approved, we can't really tweak anything. Because once I've cross-hatched, it's an absolute nightmare to fix things on the computer. So
Because you're drawing on paper still.
Yes.
Yes.
I'll do a pencil version, which sometimes is various scans of other pencils cribbed together on Photoshop.
Yeah.
And often I'll print that back out and work again on top of pencil. But then you can see on the right, there is a final ink drawing, which is done with a ball pen, and then I colour that on Photoshop. So once I'm down to cross-hatching it, it's craft all the way from there.
Sure.
Everything's, and it ended up taking forever, because I just kept adding more and more detail, and I was like, I'm not going to be home till late tonight, to my wife, can you do the kids' dinner? And I put more effort than I needed to, but it's almost like once you've started, you might as well finish being completely madly over the top.
Yeah.
I love to have the trees almost feel like theater curtains to frame the image. I don't know, was that an intentional part of your composition?
Well, they were there to frame. I hadn't thought of it like theatre. You're right. I guess the point of it was to almost have it like a comic strip, where hopefully you've got these different stories, like the family who are arriving, looking out from their car at this kind of crazy world of children going wild in the forest. So I guess the structure is to have these 2 panels really of the arrival and what they're arriving into. So I think even when I'm doing an illustration, it's generally using comic tools these days.
So, thanks. Kevin, this is the process you went through for the cover of your new comic. I wonder if you could talk about what you went through, and also just your use of photos and images here.
One thing I started doing lately is when I draw an issue of a comic, I also draw a little thumbnail of what the cover is going to be of the next issue, sort of as a challenge to myself to like call my shot, like way ahead. And so when I did issue 3, I drew a little thumbnail of like a little baseball player guy as the cover, because I knew there was going to be this story in issue 4 about fast pitch softball that I did, and I knew it was going to be in issue 4. And so I called my shot by like drawing this little, the image that's sort of in the middle on the bottom second from the left. That was the little thumbnail I put in issue 3. So then I was like, well, that's, locked in now. And so then my first pass was like the 2 on the top with the blue. That was my first pass at the cover, and it was just kind of sloppy, and I didn't really like it. And so I just kept drawing it over and over and over. It's a story about fast pitch softball players in the early 80s. And so then there's some reference photos of like what their hats look like and what the guys look like. They're kind of like middle-aged guys. They're a little bit older than young baseball players.
Mustaches.
Yeah, big mustaches. That's basically what's going on here. And then there's the cover of like a program to a fast pitch softball, and that was just sort of for design, like thinking about like that era of design, but it didn't really go into the cover at all. Yeah, that's what this is here.
I almost wondered if you were trying to create a baseball card effect.
Well, I already was doing that border on the cover of all those comic books, and so I just kept that. It does end up looking like a baseball card, yeah, for sure.
And how are you making these drawings?
It's on paper, and then I scan it in, and then I play around with it in Photoshop. Yeah.
Do you use a lot of photo reference in your work?
No, but you have to look things up at times, right? You have to look things up because you're like, I don't really know exactly what that looks like. And then one of the tricks that you learn in cartooning, they say, is like, you look the reference up, and then maybe you do a drawing from the reference, and then you put the reference photo away, and then you use your drawing and then you iterate from there so that you're working within the two-dimensional world of like drawing and thinking and seeing as a drawing. Because if you keep looking at photos too much, you do drawings that look like photos, which whatever, it's fine.
But if you have a style the way we both have of flattened, simple characters, it would be totally weird if they were holding a realistic mobile phone. So you have to kind of figure out what does a Kevin Huizenga mobile phone is not a good example, but you have to figure out what your version of that thing looks like. And somebody, I don't remember who it was, once said, what you try and draw is what you're trying to draw what it does, not what it looks like. For a cartoon, and I kind of thought that's interesting. Maybe with mechanical objects or with things that people use, you have to draw the stuff that will communicate what that does. And that's the problem, right? These days, a lot of things look like oblongs, shiny oblongs.
Yeah, it has to feel alive, kind of, what it does. That's the way I would say it. It feels alive. The thing, like photographs look a certain way. Like there's like, it's hard to describe. It's like you can see the camera lens. Like you can see that it's a view of a thing. I'm not going to be able to explain it, but I always want to get away from it looking like a photograph.
What you were talking about, Tom, about drawing objects, this is a great example. Can you talk about the thinking that went into this? And I was wondering if you were looking at like Richard Scarry or children's illustrations, or just what was going on with this.
Yeah, that's a good point. I probably Richard Scarry is there in my brain from childhood. I absolutely loved those books. The busy world where there's just loads of. So I think that's a sort of given that there's some Richard Scarry in there anyway. It was a kind of a weirdly slightly political thing where book festivals in Scotland kept getting cancelled because someone would have a problem with one of their sponsors. But generally, if you've got enough money to sponsor a book festival, there's going to be something in your business practice which is questionable somewhere or other. So a lot of them got cancelled. And I thought, well, I'd like to do something which is kind of playful about this idea of I thought I could make the book festivals really bad. Like do the opposite. Instead of saying, oh, book festivals are great, I just do them so bad that people kind of read it round for themselves and realise I'm being positive about book festivals. And I think I'd probably seen Mad Max Fury Road not that long before, and I just had this idea of a kind of post-apocalyptic book festival where it's happening in cars. And this page is an example where the stuff I start up at the top where my sketchbook has those yellow rungs, and I sort of start with an idea, and especially something like this where with my work quite often I might be doing something about something quite highbrow like literature, but there's a part of me that just wants to draw Star Wars comics from when I was 12. And I find ways to indulge myself in that while being paid by the literary part of The Guardian to do it. So this was one I just thought, oh, I'd love to draw some really crazy Mad Max type things. But I suppose in a way this page is me figuring out what does that look like in my world. And I just kept filling up the page, and then, so I guess you sort of expand on the page of the sketchbook, and then I get to a point where I have to figure out how that fits into the space of the page. And I don't have a huge space at The Guardian, it's about that big. And I have to get the text in there and tell the story, so then I have to sort of squeeze my ideas into the panels, but sometimes that's where the interesting thing happens. How do you lay this out on the page? And obviously a big truck rushing past is a kind of perfect thing to chop into 4 panels. And again, once I realised I'm doing a big truck covered in spikes, covering the 4 panels with a narrative about post-apocalyptic book festivals. At that point, I'm sort of relaxed and like, okay, we're okay this week, and now I can have fun choosing the right words. And weirdly, I almost do what Kevin was talking about. I like my text to really fit the box. So if I can, I like to avoid hyphenating words. You can't always, but it sort of helps me write. It's like a structural element, which sometimes you think, oh, if there was another word in there, that would look nice. And then you come up with another one and think, actually, that sounds nicer as well. So I guess that's what comics are, obviously. We all know that, about laying things out on the page. But sometimes it's a weird, counterintuitive thing, like maybe a slightly anal obsession with laying things out can lead you to write something differently.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate what you do, this is just like when you draw a car. When we see cars in the world, I would say you can see underneath them. And so when you see a car in comics, if you can see underneath them, and you see like the shadow of the car and you see all 4 wheels, then that's what a car looks like. But sometimes if you draw a car like from the wrong angle, it looks like a photograph of a car or something like that. But you're drawing, you can only sort of see underneath cars. You could see like a little light underneath cars, like out in the world. And so I think that's like the icon of car in the mind. And that's what's going on here too.
Yes. Although I was talking to someone about this recently, I realised I still draw cars with old style bumper fenders, I think you call them.
Yeah. I know.
And now you look at cars, they don't actually have fenders anymore. They're just
blobs,
But I can't help, I'm still drawing cars as I saw when I was a teenager. So I guess someday I have to move that up. But
in a way, it's actually easier to draw cars now because they're just blobs with like random lines around. You can kind of just draw like a blob with 4 wheels and it looks like a car now.
Yeah.
My favorite artist who draws cars is Frank King in Gasoline Alley. Those old time Model Ford. Yeah. One of the things that made me laugh out loud was the book canon. It didn't make it into the final strip.
Oh right, yes. Well, that's the fun about playing on the page, is you can just try all these things out, and a bit like Kevin was saying, you sometimes just make a list of things or going through a process of making yourself come up with ideas. So you're almost just like, let's keep going while this is working, and I'll do this, and you get on a flow, and then there's a point which I have where I have to hack it back to what works to tell the story. So maybe the book canon will appear in another cartoon.
Cool. Kevin, this is, well, first of all, tell us what F is here.
Well, when F started out where I like I'm not diagnosed as having attention issues, but like I kind of noticed them in myself at a certain point, and I would make little notebooks and I would write the word focus on the cover, and then I'd be like, this is my focus book. And so like every day when I sit down and I don't know what I'm doing, this is where I start, is this book. And so I've made many of these little focus books over the years, and then for a while, then it just turned into just putting F on the cover and then playing with the F design and stuff like that. And so F just stands for focus. That's not explicit, and so then what this is I have a Patreon, and then I make what I call electronic magazines and send them to the Patreon subscribers. And so it's really just like a blog post, but I love to make a cover, and I love to like to lay the thing out in InDesign as if it's a magazine and have little bits of text and so on and so forth. So I like to make these covers when I make these posts, and so that's what these are. A few of the many issues of F Electronic Magazine is its full title, I guess.
I wanted to ask you about this because you, more than a lot of cartoonists, really like to share your sketchbooks and process zines, and I just wondered why you like to pull the curtain back.
I like it because I like it when other people do it, and it's a golden rule sort of thing. It's like, that's what I, do unto others as you would have them do. It's like I want to look at other people's notebooks. I want to hear about the struggle or the tricks or the systems or the agony. So then I think, well, if that's what I want from other people, then maybe that's what I should do. That's all it is, really.
Is there a specific cartoonist or a few people that you really think do a great job at that?
Being put on the spot, I can't think of anybody, but I love it. I love.
But do you never worry that you're giving? I don't think you are, but I worry about this when I do that. Is am I giving away some magic here?
Yeah, right.
Or am I going? My worry about sharing my sketchbook pages, which I enjoy doing from time to time, is they'd sort of stop being my sketchbook pages and they'd become another work.
Yeah,
do you have like
you get self-conscious about it. Yeah,
secret sketchbook which you'd never share.
Yes, and I think that's very healthy. And I actually started another journal recently where I was like, this is the journal, and I'm never going to show anybody of this journal because it is healthy.
On Patreon, they go to the like $1,000 a month.
We can talk. Yeah, no, I think and I've heard someone else talk about this recently too with Robert Crumb, where Robert Crumb has started, publishing his sketchbooks, is famous for his sketchbooks, and then at a certain point it became he was so self-conscious about it that then he had to start a secret sketchbook, or not, it's not secret, it's just that nobody, it's like, and I had that too with my own self recently, where I was like, I maybe need to start a journal where I process things where I'm like, I'm not going to show anybody this. I think it's healthy. I think you're right. But I also, giving away the trick, I think that I also, believe me, I'm worrying about all this stuff all the time, for sure. And I think the movie Lloyd Llewellyn, there's also a part where one of the recording artists was like, never put out the demos. Like
Llewyn Davis.
Llewyn Davis. Yeah. And where they're like, never put out the demos. And that sticks in my head too, where it's like, oh, that is probably the best. Don't ever. Yeah. But of course, whatever. It's just.
I love seeing your work, and I think it's really healthy to see that sort of thing, because I think there's a really bad thing that happens these days on Instagram and the internet, where people make what they call sketchbooks, and they flip through them, and each page is like a finished work of art, like a perfectly drawn picture. And you think it's almost like we need two different words.
I mean, a sketchbook should have like phone numbers in it.
Well, I think so,
like a little list.
Yeah, I totally agree. I used to be paralyzed about sketchbooks. In college, I'd make fake sketchbooks. I'd draw all the good drawings, I'd paste up into things, because I couldn't bear the idea of having a bad page in a sketchbook. And I then told myself, these aren't sketchbooks, they're notebooks. And I'm going to write shopping lists in here. I'm going to let my children draw in here if they want to. Yeah. And I'm going to just make them for creation. And weirdly, when I did that, they actually ended up looking more interesting than when I was trying to make art in a sketchbook. So I always want to call them notebooks or workbooks or something
Yeah.
to make it different from that Robert Crumb thing, which for most of us is just not even a possibility, and actually for me wouldn't be that helpful. It would be like making a work of art, whereas these are about they're steps towards making a work of art.
For Kevin, I wondered if it was partly also your teaching and just trying to share your process with your students.
Yeah. A lot of what goes into these is me like thinking about class and planning and writing notes about class, and then of course I never even get to that stuff in class. But then I'm like, well, I might as well publish the notes as well. Maybe that'll help, or yeah.
So, Tom, this is such a wonderful pair of strips here where you really let your imagination run wild. I wonder if you could talk about just how you approach these types of, very packed strips.
Yeah, I suppose I chose these two because I was thinking of times when my work has a kind of sketchbooky quality in the final art. And the first one, called Characters for an Epic Tale, which I just started with that, what's his name, Joseph Campbell, the hero mythos. And it's about these archetypes in a story, and they'll be like the young boy hero, the wizard. I mean, Star Wars kind of uses that, the pirate, which is Han Solo. And I just thought it would be fun to imagine all sorts of things and just get crazier and crazier. And it's really just there. It's a sketchbook page which I've edited and worked on. And that's one of the ways I come up with ideas is just start somewhere and keep going, come up with as many ideas as I can, and then trim it back to funny ones. And the nice thing about working with stick figures is you've got this very structural, simple, iconic stick man or stick figure, but for some reason people always think they're a man when it's just the basic one. And then what can I add? Just a little bit of something to turn it into a hermit or a sort of angel. So I enjoy playing with those structures. And I guess on the other side was just, I love Edward Gorey's work, and the structure of an alphabet is a really fun way of tricking yourself into making something, because it's a short number of things, there's a structure to what you're doing. And in this case, I just thought, I'll come up with silly, almost like on my wall as a kid, my mum had sewed a Miffy, all the characters from Dick Bruna, who's a brilliant children's book illustrator, and it was an A to Z teaching me B is for ball or whatever, and I just had an idea of doing a silly version with almost abstract sounds. And then you've got the structure, and it's just how do I make 27 interesting things which work together but don't repeat each other.
Kevin, I've been wanting to ask you about this page for a long time. This is from The River at Night. I think this is one of your most impressive compositions, and I know you put a huge amount of effort, and I have a slide that you shared where you really kind of break down your process here. Can you walk through how you did that and what the idea was behind that page?
All right, I'll try to.
You have 2 minutes now.
Yeah, I'll try. So in the book, and there's not a slide of this, but there's a spiral that goes the other direction, which is a spiral of deep time. So it's like a spiral of soil and volcanoes, and like it's a famous geological science diagram of like a spiral of land that goes into infinity, and it's supposed to show like millions of years into the past. And so I made a version of that for The River at Night, and that's in a different part of the book. And then once I was working on this River at Night book, I started seeing the possibility for all these sort of like kind of mirror structures where like I did this one way here and I'll do it the other way here but flipped. And then there became this part of the story that was called what's the title? It's The Mirror. I can't remember the title of this, my own story, but it had something to do with the mirrors. And so then I had this idea of then doing the opposite spiral, going the opposite direction, but making it a sort of Hall of Mirrors spiral. And so, like, if you go back to the other slide, the final version of it, it's like Glenn is walking into the spiral, but then he's also mirrored into the walls of the spiral as it goes through, and so on and so forth. And I kind of fudged it. I worked pretty hard to try to do the math, to try to figure out how to draw the mirrors correctly. And then at a certain point, I was like, it's not worth trying to do this mathematically. And so I just fudged it and did the best I could. That's the short version, basically.
And you use your process example here. It looks like on that lower right side, is that, can you share what that particular layer is?
The lower right side?
Is this something you were doing in Photoshop to give it that?
I remember now, the story was called The Hall of Mirrors of Nature. And then there's the book by Richard Rorty that's called Mirrors of Nature, that was sort of like, or Philosophy in the Mirror of Nature. And it was like a little joke play on that. Anyway, so what these sketches are is like, my friend Dan Zetwalk is much better at Adobe Illustrator than I was, and I was like, Dan, could you help me by like building in Adobe Illustrator like a spiral that also is sort of like a hallway? And so I think he built that thing in the upper right in Illustrator, and then I sort of used that and I sort of traced it, and as you can see, the one on the left, it almost starts to become a tower, and I was like, maybe it'll be a tower. And I basically just drew it over and over and over and tried to figure out how to make it work. And these are some examples of that.
So I don't know if we're going to get through all of the examples, because I do want to give everybody a chance to ask questions, but I did definitely want you to talk about these New Yorker covers. First of all, there's so much going on in that one on the left in particular. How do you lay out a page like that, and what goes into that?
I think one of the things Kevin and I are, I think, both quite inspired by is sort of infographics and presenting it. I mean, comics are infographics in a way, but the techniques that you can use to tell a story on a page. And I want it to work as well. I don't want it to just be a sort of interesting muddle. I sort of want it to be busy, but also to be clear. And that is a lot of moving things just a few millimeters to one side. So what I do is I make a very rough pencil drawing at first, and with the New Yorker I'll send it to them quite roughly to check they like the idea, and if they approve it, then I make a very tight pencil drawing, and I'll do that on paper because I still find I do my best thinking and starting on paper. But then I'll scan that pencil drawing into the computer and move things around, make sure all the circles are proper circles, and fiddle with it a lot to get a really clear, especially with something like this, a really clear version, which I then print out and trace off in ink. So I get a crisp version, and then I can do all my cross-hatching and work on there. So my work is going in and out of the computer quite a lot, but I'm really using the computer for tweaking something, and I'm using the drawing desk for making things. And so in both of these cases, there's a sort of, I've come up with this very simple idea, which one of them is you see everybody's thoughts in a speech bubble or a thinks bubble, and the other one is it's always a piece of music. And those were real music that someone from the New Yorker wrote out for me. And they're all pieces of music related to spring, so that was an extra complication. But I quite like it when there's a sort of level, an extra level that really I got some emails from real music nerds who were so excited that they recognised the music. And I guess sometimes it's just about going that bit further, spending that extra day just tweaking things to make them, maybe in a way other people wouldn't notice, but what's the point if you're not going to give it your best? I can't remember what I was trying to say there, but yeah, I love doing these, and again, they're done without words, which I find much more difficult, but I love it when I can be playful with the comics language on the cover of the New Yorker, so that's why I shared it.
And you see, you're nodding. Is that a similar approach for you?
I was just nodding in that, like, I do the exact same thing where it's like draw in pencil, but then put it in the computer and then fuss with it, and then print it out and then trace it, same thing. Yeah.
So we have a few more slides, but I think we should stop and
Sure,
take some
yeah.
questions if anybody has questions. It's a little hard for me to see with the lights, but yes.
So actually, I have a question for each of you. Tom, I was curious about the New York Times cartoon. I really like the composition, how you framed it, having in the background the beginning of the narrative and sort of how you sort of switched it and how you used the color shadowing. And I was curious, when you're doing a lot of your comics, are you looking to other inspirations or like paintings and things like that where you have sort of a stacked composition? Just curious if you're looking for things that are not just comics for your inspiration.
Will you repeat the question?
So my question was...
No, not you. The guys.
It's all, yeah.
Okay.
She was asking about the New York Times for Kids cover and the way I used perspective in that, and it's a stacked perspective. There's no vanishing points or anything like that. And she was asking if that comes from looking at other art forms. And yeah, it does a bit. When I was at art school, I guess we were looking at the Japanese style of stacking things instead of having perspective lines. And I just naturally find that lots of perspective lines on a page of comics of this type I make, I find a bit distracting. I want things to be simpler and flatter than that. So I very rarely use perspective in my work. And most often there's nothing at all. It's just, as you say, stacking. So that probably does come from looking at other art forms. I mean, generally, I don't spend a whole lot of time when I'm working on an illustration like this looking at other work. At the beginning, I might look for some inspiration, but now my whole time is spent looking at art or looking at the world and just filing things away to use in comics later. So almost anything could inspire me or inspire a cartoon, and I guess you just get used to combing the world for things that you like, and then you reconstitute them in your work as your own thing.
Is it okay to ask a question?
Yes, yeah.
Kevin, I was looking at the hollow mirrors, and I really loved how, even though so the obvious way would have been to have a continuous spiral, and I really liked how you used the non-continuous spiral. So I was thinking, how are you thinking about lines to suggest movement of the character in that composition?
How do I...
How are you thinking of using lines?
using lines to suggest movement. I mean, I don't know. The character walks through the space, So if anything, I think what I was thinking about was this character walking, and that the eye would follow this character walk. And then there's this sort of almost like musical sense when you're drawing, where it's like I think of it as musical sense of like, there's a lot of lines here, so I need to balance it here, or this big space here is balanced by a little bit of detail here, and it's very intuitive. It's just like, it's what feels right. I do sometimes, though, with this spiral, I do sometimes have some templates of like the golden ratio that sometimes if I'm like, something doesn't seem right about this, I'll put in some geometric layers in Photoshop, and then I'll be like, oh, if I nudge this or I nudge that, then it will be a little bit more geometrically stable. So I do that sometimes. I don't know if that's what you're,
Thank you.
Anybody else want to ask a question? Yes, over here, thanks. Oh, there is microphones. Thank you.
all right. No. Testing.
Hello?
Yeah.
So my question is, say you didn't have a deadline or anything for a comic or an illustration. Has there ever been a time where you were stuck on ideas, kind of like a perfectionism type of situation, where every idea is not creative block, but it's like idea block? Have you ever been in a situation where no idea was good enough?
Yeah, that happens to me all the time. It really does. I find weekly deadlines so helpful. I find it very difficult to do work without those deadlines. and that's why I haven't done a graphic novel since my book Mooncop, because I find it so much harder, and I do exactly what you're saying. It's very difficult not to become a perfectionist, and I'm thinking I need to find a way to trick myself into doing those deadlines. So yeah, it's difficult, and that's the great thing about somebody demanding something from you. It forces you to pull yourself together and do something, and then you can look at it later and decide if it's good or not. But I don't know how to do that without. Maybe Kevin has a good answer for us.
No, I have the problem that we're talking about where I made a deadline for myself. I tried to finish my issue by then. I was like, I missed the deadline. A month went by, another month went by. It's like 3 months past my own deadline. I started feeling very awful about myself, and like, what am I doing? Like, I'm crazy. And then I would work on it every day, and I'd find more and more things to fuss with and fix. And then a page, I would decide a page didn't work at all. I have to do it completely over from scratch, and it's maddening. Yeah.
But then thinking of the river at night, you could. I don't think you would do something like that as a weekly gig. There are some things which just need that level of effort to make something, which in the end is completely brilliant.
Well, thanks. I mean, I talked myself into just being like, this is just how it is, this is fine.
We could probably do one last question, I think.
And we'll try and have a less depressing answer.
Tom.
Could
We'll do 2 more.
you both turn in graphic novels by the end?
Could you give us a big advance?
Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to put in a plug for Kevin's Patreon. Like, I subscribe to a few cartoonists. A lot of cartoonists have Patreons, and like I just like to support cartoonists whose work I love, but nobody puts as much effort and just like delivers the goods like Kevin. Like, if you're looking to support one cartoonist with a Patreon, it's like you pay as much as like taking Kevin out for a cup of coffee a month. And you won't believe like the amount of great stuff that you get. If you like what you saw today, it's like he just delivers and delivers and delivers. I just think everyone should subscribe to Kevin's Patreon.
I agree. Thank you, Paul.
Is there any other questions? I think we got like 2 more minutes. If not,
Yeah. What kind of eggs do you use?
I use just this Japanese pen, Uniball iMicro, which I draw everything with it. They have lovely black ink, and it has just the right sort of line for me. It's pretty much, it doesn't change much. It's very, very simple and clear. And then there's a few other things I use if I have a big area of black, but that 90% of what I draw is drawn with one of these.
I just use all the regular kind of microns and so forth, but lately more and more I'm using fountain pens with like an ink called carbon ink, which is really nice, and then Lamy fountain pens to play around with. Fountain pens, yeah, with little cartridges,
I have just one more question. Where do you get your ideas from?
This is a thing that they say sometimes, but I don't think ideas are the problem. Sometimes I think the time is the problem. And at a certain point, there's so many ideas. Like, I have tons of ideas, and it's time and paying the bills that's the problem for me anyways. I don't know. That's resonated with me when people say ideas are not really the problem, but time is the problem.
Right. I think for me, maybe I find it reasonably easy to persuade myself that an idea is good enough for a very small cartoon in The Guardian, where I feel like people have bought the whole paper, there's this little thing, or they're seeing it on the internet for free. It's just like a momentary thing, and I'll do another one next week. So it's like a thought. And those ideas I can do quite easily. The idea of writing longer things, I love it. I love graphic novels, but those sorts of ideas that feel worth exploring in a whole book, I find hard, and that's why I'm slow.
Well, thank you both. This was a really great conversation. Thank you all.
Head over to the donor quarterly table if you want to get a book signed. And have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good.